Hi everyone, hope everyone is well. Today I am looking at the new 1.4 version of the rulebook for Eylau 1807. Printed it out. This was released from the publisher like a couple of days ago. I've printed it out, written a load of notes, and I've compared it to the original book, the original rulebook. So what I want to do in this video is quite a detailed look at what has changed, what improvements have been made, what new things or rule changes have been implemented, and a couple of suggestions from myself as to how it could be even further improved. And I'm going to do quite a long video. I'm not going to sort of surmise it quickly. I'm going to be quite detailed in this video. If you are brand new to Eylau 1807 and you're thinking of getting it, and you want to see how the rules are evolving, how the rules are improving over time, this is a video for you. Equally, if you're an existing player and you've got the printed copy and you're playing with this and you want to see again the changes from 1.4 to the original printing, which also includes all the changes that I'm sure that they've made along the way, then this is a good video for you to check out as well. Overall, I would say there's a lot of improvements in the new 1.4 compared to the original printing, and a lot of clarifications, a lot of language improvements, as well as some new bits and pieces. And I'm going to go through each of those almost page by page and highlight them and go through them. I'm going to do exactly the same thing for the scenario book and for the player's aid as well. So it's quite a few things to go through, and I'm going to take my time and we're going to have a deep dive look at the rulebook for Eylau 1807 version 1.4. So no further ado, I'm going to move my camera and get the two rulebooks set side by side, and we'll go through them. So what we have here are the original rulebook, the printed rulebook which came in the game, and then version 1.4 printed out here. I have marked some of the pages, some with my scrawl that you probably won't be able to read, and it's really just prompts for me to remember to talk about certain parts. So what I'm going to be doing now is going through almost page by page and showing and talking about the new stuff and the fixes and the amendments in 1.4 compared to the original rulebook. Now, to preface this, I haven't played the game with the new rulebook yet. On my other table, I have the full game set up, the grand scenario, the 2-map scenario, all set up, ready to go. Once I've done this video, that's the next thing I'm going to do. And I'll do an after-action report, talk about the mechanics, and probably review or go through the rulebook again based on what I have learnt from playing through the large scenario. So now, with no further ado, so table of contents pretty much the same as the original. We now have the leader movement here as section 11.1, which makes sense. And as we go to the next page, we have a few changes from the original. So we've got terrain effects on movement, which is a very welcome addition. We'll look at that section. Some amendments to the fire section, some new sections there, and the terrain effects on the combat. So you can instantly see that the game contents pages are a lot more user-friendly. You can get to the information that you need when playing the game much quicker. Introduction, just a few graphical layout changes here. I already felt that the game was the graphics of the game were very high quality in terms of its layout, so that's very welcome. We've got some language changes here in this section here on how the game is played. And again, overall, I would say nearly everything that I read, the language improvements definitely helped clarify some of the rules. We have here a new section on the organisation on the rules. Well, I say new, it's been rewritten. And we have here an amendment to the important notes here. Then as we go over to the game material page, so this page and here, we have a new section to include the tally sticks into the game, of course, and a clarification on cavalry here about the units on their on their back side are tired, less effective when attacking, cannot reaction charge. So quite an important amendment there. So again, it's clear to the player. As we go to page 7, section here, language improvement on playing pieces compared to the original. There's a note here about the what's classed as, I'm not going to try and pronounce these French terms, make a right hash of it, what are classed as the heavy cavalry, or heavy horse as I would call it. And then a language improvement on the alternative strength point markers. Then the wooden cubes. And this is where some of the graphic design comes a little out of kilter. Obviously, there's more prose in the new rulebook, so they've obviously had to lay out some sections. So, for example, in the wooden cubes, we have here a new graphic layout here, which is, I thought, was a little. This is interesting. So one of the things they've done compared to the first rulebook is to get everything to fit. They've had to sometimes condense 2 paragraphs into one. This is an example here. We've got one larger paragraph compared to the original rulebook, which had 2 paragraphs for the same sort of section. Okay, so leaders. Few changes here. So here we have on this section here 8.4, the leaders here, which in the original rulebook is this section just there. We have this more clarification here on army and corps leaders move at the beginning of the order phase. Division leaders move when their division is activated. Here, the French corps and division leaders are switched around compared to the original rulebook. It makes more sense to me to learn about the corps at the corps level and then the division level. So I thought that was a good amendment. And here I've made a note about Murat. He has 1 CP and can change an order of 1 cavalry division, which looks to be consistent. The only thing I thought on this rulebook, on 1.4, we have, and it's just about a graphic layout really, we've got a section of the prose here, and it sort of abruptly ends after he can, and then as you turn the page, then you've got the continuation of that piece of prose, a continuation of that rule. And what I would do ideally, if it's possible, is to have that piece of prose here in this section as well, just so everything's neat and tidy when you're learning about the rules of Murat. So that's just a note to the designers and graphic people at Sound of Drums. Sequence of play. Okay, so there's a couple of notes I've made here. So note number 5 is the activation phase, which looks again like a language improvement. There is a clarification here on all eligible infantry units that have an enemy unit in one of their front hex, and all unlimbered artillery units that have an enemy units in their line of sight and within range may execute fire combat. We'll talk more about some of the rules about fire combat later. And then we get to section, so a couple of clarifications there about infantry and within range. Section 6 looks like a language improvement. So section 8, so this was an interesting section. This is on the sequence of play. This, I think, needs a little clarification. So we can see here in section 8, the next turn starts with weather determination, followed by the determination of ACs, and then by the order phase. And yet here, when I made a note of it, here it's the order phase first and then the determination of the ACs. And here it's saying it's the other way around on consecutive turns. Now I think one of these is probably incorrect, and I think it's that one that's incorrect. So a little bit of clarification needed on that, or a little bit of consistency, or if that is indeed intended as designed. But I took it as this way. So you do the order phase first, and then you do the determination of the available ACs for each army. I will try, when I play through the game again, I will try that and see what I think. Page number 10 here, weather and evening. I made a note here about snow. So this is in the rule set, we have it as the weather is either clear, snowfall, or snowstorm. I think I can remember reading in the scenario book a reference to just snow. I take anywhere I read snow as snowfall. Again, a little clarification would be useful. Snowstorm. Again, this is a language improvement. Half the number of available SPs to be recovered by regroup order. Round fractions down. Sometimes in the rulebook it says round fractions up. So that makes that very clear, which is good. Order phase. I've highlighted this one here. This looks like a language change compared to the original rulebook. Then we're on to our command range. So this page to this page. Again, language improvements in this section here. Okay, and I've highlighted this rule here. And this is for me when I play test or when I go play through the next game. Initiative rolls happen after spending available CPs. Here we've got a clarification on the initiative tests. The new order marker is placed in the according division box on the player sheet, which makes sense. A rule clarification there. Russian reserve artillery divisions. So I've highlighted this section here. So Benningsen, I don't know how you pronounce his name, I apologise for my poor language, must be within 12 hexes of the division. And so I've highlighted that. All units of a reserve artillery division must stay together as one continuous formation. If a unit is not part of the formation, it must move in a way to be part of the formation again. Again, another rule clarification, simplification there. So we get into our orders section. Again, just a little bit of difference compared to what was originally printed. I've highlighted this here, 4 hexes. Let me just check why I've done that. I think it's just a clarification there on this section here, on the orders. Then we go to page 13, should be next, yeah. Again, just a clarification on the defend order. It's a little different, you can see there, a little different paragraph compared to the original printing. And there isn't a lot of these in the rulebook in this 1.4. A lot of the changes that I went through comparing the new version to the old one are consistently, improvements to the clarity on a lot of the rules, a lot of the wording. Let's go to the next page. Looks like I made some notes. So interestingly, section 13, available activation cubes compared to determination of available activation cubes in the original. This is where I think the rulebook has definitely gone through a revision where some of the English language has been gratefully shortened, made a little bit more punchy. That's a good example of that. It's just a header, but it's just more clear, I think, to the English reader. It's definitely welcome. Then we have some different improvements here and here. Again, just language improvements, looking at my notes. All looks good, all made sense. Page 15, again, just more improvements. A little bit nicely laid out here, so it's a bit more easy to read. I'm always a big fan of shorter sentences, more spaced out, rather than large continuous paragraphs. It helps me. I don't know if anyone else feels the same way. Okay, so I've got a rules section here which I've highlighted. So I think we all know this, but with each additional activation, the units of that division will experience a downgrade in its movement abilities. So I've highlighted that. Language improvements here on this section here. So it's page 17 on the mass cavalry charge. Again, just rule clarifications in this section here. simultaneous fire segment. Okay, I can remember this when I first started playing the game. Infantry, and it's highlighted here, infantry units that have an adjacent enemy in one of their front hexes complete a fire combat. Again, clarification. Units, formation and facing. I've highlighted quite a few parts here. Looking at my notes. So, general speaking, I think this is just rule clarifications. All made sense to me when I went through it. There's one point from here that they've moved into the into section 19, and I think from memory it's about the units facing, so they've moved that point to a later section, which again made sense. And then on the units infantry section here, when infantry units enter obstructed hexes, they do so in line formation. Great. They have all round facing, which is an important rule. So good to note there. Then we're into square, which is just on this. The original rulebook is just down here, and we've got again some more clarification. So a unit's formation doesn't need to be activated. This is a really important rule. Doesn't need to be activated to be able to form a square when enemy cavalry is activated. See 17.311. Units whose formation are under strategic move, retire or regroup may form a square. So if those foot is being charged by the cavalry, they can form a square in those circumstances. When an infantry unit forms a square and is stacked with an artillery unit, the artillery unit is considered part of the square, which one would expect in a game with Napoleonics. The infantry unit is placed below. The artillery unit is placed below the infantry unit in a square. The artillery unit can execute fire combat if unlimbered. If the square retreats, the artillery unit is eliminated if unlimbered and not succeeding its limber role. See page 32, which we will come to. So quite an important rule there about squares. 17.31 forming squares. I've highlighted a few, again, just rule clarifications. And here we have a section in green. So it's a good opportunity to talk about their use of colour. So the publishers used green to highlight new things or important things since the last revision. I take it, that's my assumption. It's fairly, I would normally use blue, but they use blue a lot for their other pieces of text, so I guess that's why they've used green. Even on my printout here, which is a fairly low quality printout, I could still read it okay. Here we have the top unit executes this check in case of a stack of infantry artillery units tries to change square formation. So it's still talking about the square formation there. So I've got quite a few notes on stacking. Stacking limit rules are always in effect. So these basically are notes that I've made comparing this version to the very original. And it's just, again, clarification, slightly different use of language, etc. I did have a make a star next to this point here. It talks about when more than one infantry unit is in the same hex, the top unit is the lead unit. That makes perfect sense to me. Owning player decided when moving a second unit in a hex. I have no idea what that means. So I think it just needs a little look at the English language, what the intent is there. I couldn't fathom out what that may means. It's partly because of its use of tense. So you've decided in the past when moving a second. I couldn't understand. I still can't quite figure that one out. So that's something for the designer to take on board and have a look at. Do everything else look straightforward? Okay, movement. Okay, so movement. So got a few notes on here compared to the original, and I've highlighted this section here. The formation a unit will be in at the end of its movement is essential for determining its available movement points. I think I understand what that means. I take it as if I've got a unit in line and I want to change them to column, I'll use the movement points of the column for that movement. But I do think it needs clarifying, because I can understand why people are a little bit confused by that. And what I would do here is clarify it. I think sometimes emotive words like essential can be misleading. I think I would remove those sort of parts of the vocabulary. And what I would do here is put an example of what exactly that means. It did sort of occur to me that when I was thinking about this rule, what about artillery that start unlimbered? So they're just cannons facing and they want to limber, or the other way around, sorry. So they start limber but they want to unlimber. That would mean 0 movement points, etc. So a little bit of clarification on that rule. I think most people understand it to be the way I understand it to be the way most people do. Probably a better way of saying it, but a little bit of clarification there. And again, just some nice changes here, some revisions here. Also movement. Okay, so here we've got a section in green. A unit may fully change its own facing before starting to move, or while moving. A unit may change its facing by 60 degrees per hex entered. The change of facing doesn't cost any movement points. Very important rule. A unit has to stop when entering a hex adjacent to an enemy and can't change its formation after entering a hex adjacent to an enemy unit. I highlighted that. It also makes me wonder, and I would need to check through the rules again, so take this with a bit of pinch of salt. Just need to clarify in my mind if that would hold true if that unit then got charged by enemy cavalry. Terrain effects on movement looks fairly section. So this is one of those new sections they've included, which is very welcome. So again, just clarifying, woods, villages and the cemetery are obstructed hexes. And when crossing a slope hex, the cost is +1 by moving either up or down the hill, as you would expect. To gain the DRM being charged uphill, all attackers must attack uphill. Again, that's exactly what I would expect, playing lots of sort of war games. So again, very welcome clarifications. Fire combat, so I've made a few notes here. And we've got some new sections in green here, so you can see compared to the original rulebook here, we've got much more detailed, and I would say that's probably a reoccurring theme with this rule set 1.4. There are the sections that have been changed, add more gameplay detail and add more clarification, I would say. Infantry and artillery reaction fire combat when an enemy unit is leaving an adjacent hex, front hex while moving, not retreating. Infantry reaction fire combat when an adjacent enemy infantry unit, so adjacent enemy infantry unit, is changing into square during enemy cavalry movement. So it's important there. And then we've got a rule here, nice little bit of a chrome rule. When a French horse artillery battery unlimbers at the end of its movement, it is allowed to execute one fire combat following the rules 21.3 and 21.4. So we can see here the French horse artillery, when if it unlimbers after its movement, can indeed fire. So a very important rule for the French player. Okay, then still with the fire combat section on this page here, we've got apply a +2 artillery fire versus column and a +4 artillery fire versus square. Apply +1 for infantry defensive fire, +1 for French infantry fire against enemy infantry in square or column. So some important clarifications, etc. To there. Now I have compared the player aids with all the combat charts, and we will have a look at those to see how they have changed since the original release. If there is an infantry unlimbered artillery unit in the same hex, okay, yeah, that's when I queried this one when I read through it last night. So what this is saying is basically here with the new piece of green text here, the new edition, if there is an infantry and unlimbered artillery unit in the same hex,
they may both fire at the same or different targets, and the key word is may fire. So that means that infers it's the player's choice if they fire or not. In this example here, we can read the example here where the French player must split its fire strength and decides that two, etc. So in the example, they're inferring, and I think this is a subtlety in language. So in the example they're giving, they're saying the French player must split their fire. And this, in fairness, is saying that they may fire. So I think the clarification in my mind is I'll be trying to be very clear about this. How I read this is that this is true. If there are infantry and unlimbered artillery unit in the same hex, they may both fire at the same or different targets. And what this is saying is if you fire at different targets, you have to split your fire, which sort of makes sense. At least that's how I perceived it to be. If people have a different perception, I'd be interested in that. Please leave a comment in the comments section. But again, it's this, and this is the sort of frailty sometimes of the English language between the use of may and must, as it were. But yeah, again, quite interesting. So then we're on to cavalry evasion, leaders in combat. I need to make sure we're up to on this one here. So we haven't done assault yet. So yeah, here we are. Cavalry evasion, leaders in combat, here and here. So quite a few amendments in the cavalry evasion. Sorry, I might say evasion. And there's a lot of, I'm not going to read all these out here, but definitely I've highlighted them all. So this, you can see the evasion rules for cavalry have gone through a bit of a rewriting. And it, again, very much clearer, I think. So what I'll do when I set the game up on the board, like I said, I'm just skimming through the rules and going through them. When I set the game up on the board, I'll deliberately do a cavalry evasion and see how that works out in terms of the new rule set. Leaders in combat here, got a highlight in here in green, and they need to retreat at the same rate. So this is talking about when there's multiple leaders, I think. And they need to retreat at the same rate with which they are stacked, due to a failed hold. And if more than one leader is present in a hex, the higher ranking leader is relevant, providing dice roll modifiers, and for eventual leader loss, which is quite interesting how the highest ranking leader would take the loss if there is a stack where there are multiple leaders. And again, it'll be interesting to see that in the game. To be honest with you, when I play the game solo, it's most unbecoming, in my opinion, to target leaders in the game of Napoleonics. Line of sight. So interesting. Line of sight. So I starred this diagram here, and I actually had a chat with in the Board Game Geek forum about this particular diagram, and it I couldn't quite I'm not going to zoom the camera in, but basically it infers that a target. So I've got a firing artillery here. I've got a target, and there is a elevated landmass in between them. And from all my wargaming experience, I'm like, well, you can't. There's no line of sight. But in the diagram here, we have a green arrow to show that there is line of sight, and that I didn't quite understand. So I've just got a question mark next to that as to why that would be. I still can't figure that one out. It could be it's a simple error in the map, in the diagram, or just needs clarification. Probably, I would play the game, and that would not be line of sight. I know I'm using the traditional hex and counter rule conventions that I have, learned over numerous years, but that's what I would do. I would do it instinctively. I wouldn't even think they have line of sight. If there's a hill in the way, there's no line of sight unless the weapon is an indirect firing weapon. What I would welcome here is in the diagrams, explain the diagram in terms of the mechanics. So the reason that this counter can fire on this counter is because of this rule. The reason it can't is because of this rule. I think that would be very welcome, and it would help clear that section up nicely. The assault got a big chunky green section here, so and I'm not going to read it out, but basically there is the owning player of cavalry unit needs to decide immediately in reactions. Yeah, so there's a big section there that you would need to go through. So again, I put an exclamation mark next to this. This is in my note taking. So basically, it basically says to me, I need to play this and test it and see what happens. It's basically, I'll read it out, why not? Any unit that moves into a front hex of an enemy cavalry unit provides a possible reaction charge if that cavalry unit is not tired. The owning player of the cavalry unit needs to decide immediately, and the reaction charge is resolved after the movement unit ends in its movement. It has to stop when entering a hex adjacent to the enemy unit. Makes sense? If cavalry is executing a reaction charge, it gets the +2 dice roll modifier for charging at short distance. A reaction charge is allowed to any cavalry unit under attack, move, hold, or defend orders. That seems very clear to me, so I will try that out. In the same section here, so interestingly, when we talk about calculating odds, so we've got here a green section text, a section in green, so I'm speaking far too fast. When calculating odds, always round up 0.5 to the next higher ratio. And I think I made a point earlier in this video that in occasion you round, depending on what the calculation odds are, sometimes you roll up and sometimes you round down. So you've got to keep track on whether it's up or down, depending on what the rule is. At least I think I've got that right, so I apologise if not. Attacks charge at odds below 1 to 2 are never permitted. I think if you were to charge horse, when you know that is going to lead to a 1 to 2 result, good luck for that. But in this game set, it's saying not permitted. Interestingly here, a hex may be assaulted charged more than once. This is again an example where this rule set deviates from a lot of hex and counter games where that's often not the case. So highlighting that is an interest is very important, and it's an interesting mechanic. And I think that for those of us who play a lot of hex and counter games, highlighting the things that are different about this compared to what the normal convention of these types of games are is really important. Here we've got so if the assaulting charging unit survive the defensive fire, the defender must check to hold the hex, roll 2 dice. If the result is equal or higher than 8, the defender holds the position and the attack charge failed. Both attacker and defender stay in the hexes. Great. If the result is 9 or more, the defender holds the position and the attacker loses 1 strength point loss. So a really important rule. So I've highlighted that. And if the result is 7 or less, blah, blah, blah. If charged by, charged cavalry units retreat if that happens and lose 1 SP. Okay, the Cossacks section, very straightforward. Cossacks may not charge enemy infantry or unlimbered artillery. I can remember querying that, I think, when I played through one of my playthroughs. Check to stand. So I've highlighted this now. Okay, so this is a real minor point. It's about consistency of language. So when the rulebook uses bullet points, sort of for these nice little graphics that they chose, really, really minor. The first character of the first word should be in uppercase. Just again makes you feel as the reader there's a consistency, so it's not highlighting any rule differences. Terrain effects on. In this section still on check to stand. We've got some sections in green. When 2 units are in the same hex, you check once for the whole stack using the top unit's quality. That makes sense because the rulebook referred to this earlier. Attention, units do not need to check to stand, and if an adjacent unit doesn't pass its stand roll, or if a friendly roll retreats into an adjacent hex, that's a really important section there. This is talking more about the stand rule again. So when you come to do that, I've highlighted this to make sure that I go through all these things. Here we talks about the same rule about obstructed terrain, so terrain effects on combat, new section. Very welcome. Woods, villages and cemetery are obstructed hexes. I didn't check actually. This almost feels like a repeat, exact repeat of something. Anyway, I'll have to double check that. So then we're into retreats. Okay, so we've got a few markers here. So ignore facing being in green, terrain cost while retreating. Cavalry units, if there is no other possible retreat path, the unit loses 1 SP for each hex that it can't retreat. It's normal wargaming convention, played loads of games with that, makes sense. Okay, this is about unlimbered artillery. I've put an exclamation mark, which means I need to pay special attention, Matt, to this rule. Unlimbered artillery, it's forced to retreat, lose 1 SP, 2 SPs if charged by cavalry. And then the owning player rolls 1 dice to check if the battery is able to limber and flee. Horse artillery battery limbers on a roll 4 to 6, and all of the batteries on a 6. If it fails to limber, it's eliminated. So basically what this is saying, unlimbered artillery, if it's forced to retreat, you're going to take a strength point loss, and you're going to have to roll to see if they're eliminated or not. So a nice little bit of chrome to the game in that respect. Just more rules, layouts here, clarifications, etc. Yeah, I think we're good. Recovery, just again rules, clarifications, language improvements there. Helpful glossary. The only note I made on this, very minor, I would have put them in alphabetical order. It's entirely at the discretion of the author and the layout person. So overall, as you can see, there are quite a few things to take note of in this new rulebook. There are quite a few improvements. I still have a couple of suggestions that I sort of gave an overview of how just need a little nip and tuck for the designers and graphic people to have a look at, see if it can be even more. A few of those sections and clarifications. But overall, yeah, I'm looking forward to getting I've got the game set up already, so looking forward to start with this rulebook. So next we'll have a look at let's have a look at the player aid next, I think. So first of all, this is the player aid. This is the printed one in the game. This is the latest version I printed out on my home printer, and there are quite a few differences between the two. I'm just going to highlight the differences. It's more so that you're aware. So basically it's the DR dice roll modifiers for fire combat. This section here has more entries to it than the original. The actual firing strength points, SP modifiers, range, I believe are all the same. Same with artillery. And these are all new. So targeting obstructed terrain -2 compared to the -3 in the original. Artillery is firing on a square +4, and here it says target is square +4. So this again is a clarification as well as some changes. Defensive fire +1. French infantry fire against infantry or column in column or square +1. So again, a little bit more chrome. I talked about some of these in the previous segment about the rulebook. So it's all neatly laid out on here. We've also got our urgency limbering that we talked about here. So the horse and all other artillery. Then I've got a couple of marks here and some of the terrain effects. So number of firing SPs equals 2. Number of firing SPs in hex times 0.5 there. Got some changes here on the charge or assault effect. So in the original it was just charge. Charge in this game is the same as assault. It's just horse do the charging and foot do the assaulting. So we've got some modifiers here we're going to need to take note of. Hex side slope we're going to need to take note of. very clear. On the road here, we've got artillery and leader move at 0.5, and the original was just artillery. Marshland here, no cavalry charge, and the original just said no charge. So again, just clarifications as much as well as some new modifiers we need to take into account when we're playing through our game. Now, I think they were the main things that I made a note of. So you're going to need to print out the fire combat, and you're going to need to print out the assault charge table. If we just do a quick comparison, I think it looks like I didn't make any notes on this, but I can see instantly there's a dice roll modifiers. Some of the dice roll modifiers here are different than here, so you'll definitely need to go. I need to get my marker pen out again, just go through this again. It's very easy to miss some of the new rules sections here. We do have here a more clarification on the procedure, so which is very welcome. Again, clarifications, some new modifiers we need to take into account. So that is the assault charge table. I think if you, it's obviously a very nice mounted table here, so I'm going to maybe do something with my printouts to bring them up to snuff, as we would say, to compare them to the original. But yeah, clarifications and some new bits and pieces to try out when we're playing the game. And here we have the latest version of the Scenarios, Notes and History book. This is version 1.2. You will need this to play with the version 1.4, so I'm led to believe. So again, I printed it out. I'll be using this for the scenarios that I do my playthroughs for. And again, I've highlighted just any change that jumped out to me. Got bibliography section here, which is very welcome. Then scenarios, the description again, mostly just improvements to the language here. And this one here, so for example, it's highlighting the command points again, just the clarification. So this is important rule for scenario number 1. Following turns, the player start each following turn with phase 9.3 by placing the 5 Russian, the 6 French, and the 1 fire combat cube in the bag, and then continue with phase 9.5 by drawing 1 AC. So a new section there. There will be a point where I'm playing the sort of scenarios in reverse order. So I'm going to play the grand scenario first, and then I'll go, once I've done that, then I may well play through some of the smaller scenarios as well. Then scenarios, the massive cavalry charge again, just a little bit of clarifications. Highlighted snowfall there. I think that was maybe because I wanted to highlight the fact sometimes it says snow, not snowfall, which I talked about in the previous segment, so I don't need to cover that again. Then we have, in the special rules, there is only 1 CP for the French available. Therefore, any other orders can only be changed by a successful initiative roll. At the beginning of the following game turns, put all 13 ACs and 2 fire combat cubes in the bag. So a new section there. This all looks, again, just tightening up. So this is the attack here. We're on to the special rules. So again, just clarifications on this scenario here. Ignore all the rules regarding army fatigue combat points. Orders can only be changed by a successful initiative roll. I've highlighted here the numbers. I think the numbers here on this scenario. So just to clarify, that's previous page is 5. So let's just have a look at the equivalent on the here. So move around the camera. So special rules here. These numbers here I've highlighted, so I believe they have changed. So here it says put the remaining 9 French 8 Russian and 2 fire, and then it's saying 4 French, 5 Russian and 2 fire. I think I've got that right. So that's a very important rule for that particular scenario. Okay. Okay, so here I've made a point. Oh yeah, I say, so what they've done in this scenario book compared to the original printing is it tells you, each scenario tells you, I'm going to find a better example. Yeah, sort of, I'm going to try and make a mess of this. Control of geographical objectives at the beginning of the scenario, and then it lists those out and who controls them. It's a very minor point. What I would do is use that same format. So in this section here on this scenario, we just need to see includes the control of, etc, etc, etc. So it's consistent. So the layout of the scenarios is consistent. Again, it makes the reader sort of understand the scenario a bit better, I think. Here we've got a section in green on this scenario. Orders can only be changed by successful initiative roll again. Okay, perfect. So, and the same thing also applies for the battle. The main battle, the 2 map battles now are referred to as the grand battle scenario, which is awesome. And again, we just need to include this section here about who's, what this section is about the control of the startup. I've highlighted all of these. This is probably because I have I've just set this game up. So again, this section here is just different than the original printing, but I had no problem with it as I've already set it up, so which is great. Same here as well. So I think they're the main points I wanted to talk about. Definitely the scenario book is, by nature, and the whole historical background, etc., etc., is exactly the same from my cursory look anyway. And we have the bibliography section at the end, and very good it is too. Something that I definitely really enjoyed. Again, maybe yeah, so that looks great. So I'll just give some concluding thoughts, some initial thoughts as to having been through the new assets that we've got. So overall, I think it's great that the publishers come out with a version 1.4. I think it's great that they're 100%, 110% committed to the project, and listening to the feedback from gamers, listening to the feedback from people who are playing the game, listening to feedback from people who are reading through the rule book, etc., etc., etc. I think it's absolutely wonderful, and I think they're doing an outstanding job of reacting to what the audience want and thinking ahead as well, to adding in more pieces of slightly chrome or more detailing on the rules. So we've got, clarifications, we've got better explanations, better use of the English language, which makes everything more clear. We've got some new interesting deeper mechanics to try out when we play through the game as well, which I'm particularly looking forward to. And there's a couple of areas that I've highlighted just as examples where a rule book's never done, right? There's no such thing as the perfect rule book, but I think there are a couple of areas that could do with a little bit more explanation that would help the audience. And again, it's just that consistency of understanding. So when everyone reads it, they all have the same understanding and can all enjoy the game. So for one, I'm looking forward to playing through the grand scenario, which I've got set up on the table. What I will do is, as I play through the grand scenario, which will be a separate video, I will deliberately test some of the mechanics. So I'll deliberately play the game in such a way that you may not always be the best way to play, but will deliberately sort of stress test, if that's the right expression, some of the new mechanics that the game has. Well, not new mechanics, but some of that detailing that the game has, as well as being able to go back to the rulebook and go, is this rule is absolutely clear? Does it make the most sense? I think it could do. So I'll definitely do that. Now, again, at the beginning, I said this at the end. Again, I apologise if I've got any of the rules wrong in my explanation or anything like that. I've had this new rule book for a couple of days. I've gone through it, referred back to the original rule book to see what the changes are. But sincere apologies if I got anything wrong, and apologies for my incredibly bad pronunciation, as always.
But hopefully it will give new people a good understanding of where the game is going, and the dedication, I think, from the publisher and the designer to the game. The fact that they are doing this, the fact they are making the game more clear, more consistency clear across their player base, I think is incredibly welcome and an incredibly good sign, not only for this game, but for future games in this series, which I, for one, am particularly looking forward to. So hopefully it'll be useful for them, as well as, you know, players who've already got the game and are interested to see what has been changed or what amendments there are in this new version 1.4. If you've been through the rulebook and you've got any thoughts, please leave a comment in the comment section. If you've by any chance been through the rulebook and played the game with the new rules, particularly interested in any thoughts, even if it's just one of the smaller scenarios, interested in the thoughts, again, please leave a comment in the comment section. I will be playing the game, it's over there on the table over there, immediately after I've finished editing this video. So hopefully I'll be able to put a video up soon of a playing through the grand scenario and giving some thoughts, etc., as I do normally in my action reports. So hopefully that was interesting, especially for fans of the game or new people interested in the game. And thanks a lot for watching, as always, and take care. Thank you.